All right, I think we're good. All right, so man, this is a blockbuster. This is a blockbuster event. We got five people, and so with five people, we're gonna be having a lot of different opinions, and I want them to be aggressive. I really do, because there are a lot of different things that we can get into, but specifically with this one being the other side of abuse, and I wanted a lot of different opinions here, and I wanted to make sure we had a female opinion, a lady's opinion, to make sure we're checking ourselves and make sure we're grounded in our opinion. But with that being said, I want to take about 20 seconds to do some sharing and make sure people aren't missing out. So with that, do your sharing, people. Be back in about 20.
Okay. People always asking. People always asking. All these damn people always people always ask. People always ask. All these damn questions. People always ask. All these damn questions. All these damn questions. People always ask. All these damn questions.
People always asking me all these damn questions, and they so confused. I don't know what to tell them. Why he do this? Why he do that? How you do this? How you do that? Hell yeah, I'm trying to do what I want, and I get good grades. That's why I wear these hats with A's. These people recognize that's why they stay up in my face. Cause
people always ask me all these damn questions. People always ask all these damn questions.
they wanna know my play. They want.
Welcome back. I feel like I lost somebody, but here she goes. Here she goes. Here she goes. All right. All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Go. Go. All right. All right. Who is that? Who is that? Me? Can you hear me? I guess everybody here now. Wait. So is it me?
It's like a
check.
It sounds better. Now I'm echo.
All right. Well. Welcome back. Okay, does anybody? Because that just popped up. Anyway, so we're gonna play. So welcome to Objectively Aggressive, where we get aggressive. Today we're gonna be talking about the other side of abuse. I want to talk about the other side of abuse for a lot of different reasons. But as you can see, we have a bunch of people in this chat, in this group, and that means that we're going hard, specifically on the side of abuse. Kyrie, that's something. Kanye, that's something. There was a recent statement about Stacey Abrams and the black man. That's something. The comments about Herschel Walker. There's a lot of different things we can talk about. But here's one thing I want to keep very simple. Black men specifically. I know we go through different things that we can't even talk to our parents about different generations, and it seems like we have no outlet. I made a post about being harassed for stalking, and it wasn't to start anything. It was just start a conversation. And so when I talk about abuse, I talk about the abuse of power on the other side. Men, this is a misogynist world, but there are some things that go silent with us. So with that, I want to kick it to Dr. Hand. And so when you think about the conscience of man and how we exist, we have to be strong and be providers. And there's a lot of pressure on women. Can you talk about the pressure that you see that falls on men and how society has evolved into what you see now?
Yeah, man. I think it goes back to the saying that you're only as strong as your foundation. And so when you see men, there's a quote from Frederick Douglass says it's easier to build strong children than it is to fix broken men. And I think that idea still permeates today. Because for the first time, that we're seeing that men are growing and learning in public places where getting the information beforehand.
Doc, we got to pause. We're getting bad echo. So here's what I want everybody to do real quick. We got to take about 30 seconds to get it together. I need everybody to leave the room and come back in. You know how to do that? Hello? Okay, so I know who it probably was. Test.
You hear me?
Yep.
That sound better.
Hello? All right, so we good here?
Yeah, I heard the echo. I was trying to.
And we good here. All right, boom. Now we're back. All right, I'm sorry about that for everyone. Technical difficulties, of course, but we're good to go. Doc, I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Oh, yeah.
If you still have your train of thought, please.
Oh, yeah. So, but I think it goes back to, as a lot of times as men, we're doing on the job training. You know, I can only speak for myself. You know, I didn't have a father growing up, so I didn't have anybody to tell me how to be a man. So a lot of things that I learned about being a man was what I had to see people do. You know, my uncles, you know, he was out there running the streets. You know, my other uncle was out there kind of married, doing his own thing. So I think a lot of times we look at ourselves as the combination of a lot of things. And so when you start to look at what is the best way, or what do we create when we don't have a picture of what to be, is you're going to have a lot of men that are pretending, wearing a mask, doing what we think men should be doing. And ultimately, sometimes that ain't the right things we should be doing. So I think that there's an important to have the grace with yourself without the social pressure of realizing that, hey, I wasn't raised in the best environment, and now I'm being judged off of standards that I didn't create for myself. And so being humble and being grace, I think, is very important when you start to look at, you know, the idea that hurt people. And sometimes it's not even wittingly. Sometimes we're hurting people because we were hurt and we didn't know that wasn't the proper way to express or address things. So I think it first starts off with identifying discrepancies that you have, and then seeing contrast, you know, seeing people who represent something that you want to be. So I think it starts there, and being humble and gracious enough with yourself to know that despite our age, we're always learning. And as long as we're continuing to learn, I think that we're definitely on the right path.
Okay. So with that, it's about, I'm hearing a nature versus nurture type thing. Yeah. And being that we're in an environment that we're kind of thrown into, and when I say thrown, I mean, when you talk about resources, there are different things that we can point at, but I think about a story that my dad tells me about his father's father and how he worked on a railroad and how he had multiple families, and thinking about the black man at that time. So my great granddaddy and my granddaddy, and hearing these stories about how they treated their families and how it was terrible, and how that turns into what we see the black woman is now, trying to do everything, right? So Tay, what do you think about that?
Oh, I'm sorry, man. What was the question, man? My bad, man. I was sorry. I didn't text.
No, so right now, specifically, we're talking about how we're talking nature versus nurture, but I threw a lot of different me and you talk about generational trauma, curses, and things of that nature, and how that kind of builds into, there's this narrative and how the black man has had on-the-job training. And I'll even throw in there being raised specifically by women and no men in the house, and how we live today.
Yeah, man. That's one thing I always say about just a black. We're talking about black men. A lot of times, I don't like to say generational curses. I say generational trauma. You know what I'm saying? Because our parents and our grandparents didn't have the resources to deal with what was going on with them. You know what I'm saying? And everything that they had going on. When it came to economics, environment, society, and everything like that. So, by the time we become adults, we are looking and grabbing for some way to be our own man, essentially. You know what I'm saying? To be our own. We're trying to not necessarily break curses, right? Because we're not cursed. We're not a cursed people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not a cursed people. We're trying to break trauma. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're trying to do. So we find ways to do that and cling to those things, where we can be a positive impact not only in our family but also in our community. Right? This is where Kyrie is kind of getting, finding himself. You know what I mean? But with that, we sometimes we have to first learn to find positivity in ourselves first, and that's the one thing as black men we didn't get taught a lot, right? To find the beauty within ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Being black men, so we have to find. A lot of us have to rediscover that. First. In our adulthood. You dig?
Oh, okay, okay, for sure. And so as we move and try to rediscover, a lot of people have a lot of different perspectives, and they come from a lot of different backgrounds. And I like to talk about mental models. Mental models being the thought process to which everything that has made you makes you think the way that you think right now. And so I'm sorry, Tay got knocked off. And so with that, I want to bring in Rob. And Rob is a good friend of mine that I've known since 2003, and he offers a different perspective. And the perspective that he brings, I think, is important. And I'm not say that it's it's anything, but I wanted to bring him on because he's a financial whiz, in my opinion. But he offers something other than what we're used to hearing on my particular platform. So, Rob, what do you think about the essence of the male experience right now, and the abuse that we might face based on how we exist today?
Good night, Daddy. Good night. Good night, son.
Oh, well, that's appropriate. That is actually. We need to see more of that.
I love you. I'll come in there in a little bit.
Get some rest now.
Uh,
I love the kids. I am making a book called F Them Kids.
yeah. Sorry about that, man. So my framework, or my I guess you would call it epistemological underpinning is of the Christian faith. I was blessed enough to have my father around. My father, one of the best things he did for me was love my mom extremely well. I was excited to go back home on leave and toast their 41st wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
This past December. And so having that father figure there for me was extremely important, undergirded by a Christian faith, because as a young boy, man, we face life immediately. You have to bring some kind of value. We grow up awkwardly. Girls don't think we're attractive right away because we hadn't grown and there's a point of tension that comes with that, and you have to decide how you're going to address that. Are you going to do what you see all the other cool kids doing, or do you hit the books? And so, fortunately, growing up in the 90s, we kind of had a little bit more larger friend circle. So it was always easier to find people you could associate with, even if you weren't as cool as everybody else. So I grew up like I grew up a Christian nerd, and Steve Urkel was my spirit animal, right? And so I graduated. college. I didn't really come into my own until I got in the military. So,
I think I saw some of that development, Rob. I think I saw.
Yeah.
We us four besides our lady counterpart here is serve, and I think correct me if I'm wrong. Did you serve at all, Janae, or no?
I did not.
But you come from a family of service.
Right. I come from a military background.
Okay. And so as we segue to you in just a minute. So Rob, how do you feel like your perspective lines up with the current? Does it fall with the general populace? I'm not saying that you think like everybody. Do you tend to be going against the grain? So how do you feel as a man in this society? Black?
I don't think we necessarily go against the grain. If you talk to a lot of middle class Black people, there's some spirituality there. It doesn't necessarily have to be Christian faith, but they all adhere to like some sort of faith, family, freedom type perspective. And so a lot of one of my favorite economists, Thomas Sowell, says, and where you find a family where the mother and father are both college educated, those Black families make just as much as their white counterparts. And so in Black America, there's not as many families in that category. So I don't think I'm that much different from a lot of other families, but maybe some of those perspectives are the same. But then like Ham and Tay were talking about in their upbringing, my upbringing was different. So that also shapes those perspectives that Ham and Tay were talking about earlier. That makes sense. So I'm not that much different.
Roger that. And that's not, I just want to, as we have a lot of different opinions going on right now, and this being your first time on the platform, I just wanted to make sure as we move forward, your voice is known and cut out how you are. And that's not the spotlight. It's just to give you your time to shine. I don't know what the hell that is, but it's going to die. So, Janae, we talk about a lot of things, and Janae is important in this conversation, and not as the female perspective, but as a perspective of being tied to my hometown. And there's a lot of reinvention that's happened in 20 years. But it's, I just recently did a podcast with her Sunday. We did a quick little, some before I left, and it was good. But she talks about a lot of things on her podcast and has a great voice. And Janae, what do you think right now, before I get into this sweet serenade of everything, because this is kind of the preface, what do you think your perspective on the male experience, and we'll say Black male conscious specific, and the climate to which we're living for your Black male counterpart and your male counterpart?
So what I can say is, if we think back to when we were growing up, most of us grew up born in the 80s, raised in the 90s. That's when Black fathers really began their absenteeism. And back then, it was not as large as it is now, because, now the numbers are like 64% of Black men. Back then it was around 35-40% of Black men that weren't in the home. And so the boys then were raised by mothers, and you had a mother who was either working and out of the home, or a mother who was possibly receiving some kind of assistance. And so because of that, we have to think back and think about that voice that men heard. And so if you were not hearing that male voice, you were then in turn raised by a mom. And so for me, being a mother, and this is coming from firsthand experience, for children, you're not given a manual to life, you're giving your mother's voice. And so whatever impact your mother had on you is really just, it's passed down through the lineage. And so when we talk about environment and we talk about how people were raised, it touches back on trauma that the mother had. And so if she had trauma, that trauma is then being placed in her children. And so when we talk about men, we're talking about a brokenness that was already there from the womb. And so now you have to grow and try to cultivate your own identity. But like you all were saying, you don't have the resources. And then if you do have the resources, you don't know whether or not you need to go to the positive reinforcement or straight off into the negative. And so you're left with that question. And since you don't have that parent, you're left to do it alone.
Okay. Okay. I like that perspective. Um, that's important in the sweet serenade and understanding that the abuse on the other side can come in a lot of different ways. So I was recently watching. Is there music playing? Where?
That might be mine. My kids go to sleep to music, man. Sorry, I'll mute.
Yeah, it's cool. I was like, this is great. And so, I was recently watching Mind Hunters, and and I watched that for the psychological understanding of things, which is the FBI behavioral unit. And you talk about Dahmer, and they talk about how these guys. Now we're talking about white guys who are serial killers are formed because they're the negative experience that they had from their mother. Right. And so, and like just demeaning experience. And so I'm of the thought when we talk about nature and nurture that there are some things that are just put in people. We're talking about seeds, we're talking about trauma, we're talking about, if people want to say curses, there are things that are fed into kids. And if there's not an emotional love tank that's felt properly, that it can go any different way, white, black, whatever. And so as we saw in Dahmer, like a crazed person could live in the black community and tear it up, and that was let to happen. And I say all of that to say the limit of power that a man has, it comes to the resource. But when we talk about the power of emotion, men aren't necessarily taught to show emotion. And so when you're not taught properly how to show emotion, or you suppress it, when it arises, you have fireworks like mass shootings and, domestic violence, or you might have hurting animals at first. Like there's all these different things you can go into, but we know that I can try to talk to my dad, and he comes from a generation of just sucking it up. Right. So, and I understand that, like, I can't be mad at my dad when I try to talk to him, and he pretty much tells me to suck it up. And so who do you talk to? You can try to confide in your woman, but if you get too weak, that's a vulnerability there. And if you with the wrong one, she's going to expose that. And so what I'm saying is, where's the out? Does a man just have to he has to portray a narcissistic tendency in his life to make people stay up off of him like he's a man about business, but underneath him, he's an empathetic, sensitive, emotional person who just really wants to feel, but has to cut people off. You know what I mean? Like, where's the balance? Because like what I've understood as I roll into passing this to whomever, a man can get to a point where he's not chasing women. He's about his business and he's taking care of things. He has things. That struggle that Rob was talking about, trying to figure out who you are, you get to a point you have things. And then women start approaching you. And then they start getting aggressive, right? And then it gets ugly, and then things like that happen. And the guy says, hey, I'm getting harassed. And so insert story of the OnlyFans model who killed her boyfriend. These type of things happen. And so my sweet serenade is, what the F? Why don't we talk about the abuse that happens to men? Janae.
Sure. Look, just pull me into the spotlight. I can go on record for saying this right here. I think it's a misconception, and I do understand that for years it's been put out there that men can't have emotion, men can't show vulnerability, men can't be human. But I do believe that the narrative has changed, but now we need more men to come on board and to be honest about their vulnerabilities, to foster that table for other men to join in, and then, create that space for you all to be human. I believe we all can agree that over the years that human emotion has been desensitized. And when you see a man cry, instead of comforting him, he's mocked. And so with that, as women, we have to create that environment for you, because again, when we speak of nurturing, that usually comes from a mother. That's that unconditional love that most men have. And if a man does not have that, then that's when we speak of like the trauma. And so a lot of times, we talk of the term man child. And when we speak on that, we just speak on it as a man that can't control himself, or a man that has tantrums, and a man that is emotionally immature. But we don't look at the fact that when you have situations like that, it's because of trauma, and trauma pauses time. And so when you have adults that act in that nature, they're acting in that nature because at this specific time in their childhood, along their path of development, trauma happened and it stopped time for them, and they're still working in that element.
You know what? I agree with that. And I take that concept like when a man goes into prison and does his time, does 10 years and comes out emotionally, that man is still the same age that he went in. And I've seen it. And so as women, as you say, as a woman says that a woman is just as important in a man's life, creating that safety emotionally for him. Rob, so we were talking about Stacey Abrams and how she made a comment about why she wasn't getting the black male vote. Why do you think she's not?
Um, her agenda just doesn't resonate. And as we talk about being on the other side of abuse, I think we've as Janae was talking, I was thinking about like Jada Pinkett and Amber Heard and all of these people who have abused men in some form of fashion, and it not necessarily physical. And there doesn't seem to be an even culture of accountability across the board in terms of so what
It's a
should
double
be happening?
standard. Double
Right.
standard.
So what should be happening to Jada Pinkett? If Stacey Abrams lose, then is it the black man's fault? Where her accountability would be, well, she didn't win, and so, or if she loses, I don't know if I haven't checked it. She was down. Actually, she was up with 14% of the ballots in. But what feedback loop do women have within the culture or whatever to say that, hey, this is probably not the right thing? Because from a man's perspective, and I guess this is where we get a little bit objectively aggressive, is it feels like black women will support black women no matter what, even if they're doing something that they ought not, that they ought not do, or if there's dissent, it is not as loud as the support.
Okay. Oh, and so I've recently been hearing there's been a culture of there's no support. Now I ain't gonna say no, but there's a lack of support. Like it depends. Like you don't see a lot of R&B duets anymore with women. Like a lot of R&B groups is, they get together, but there's a lot of backstabbing. Now this is speculation in certain cultures, in certain areas, and so yeah, and so that's interesting that you say that, because you say they support regardless of what. What you think about that, Tate?
Yeah, man, I really don't want to paint a picture that there is a division within the black family, as we're seeing black families, you know, um, black men. There was a study done in 2012 or so, and it showed that black men are the most black men who are fathers are more likely to be in their child's lives, you know what I'm saying, than any other group, you know what I'm saying, of people. And really,
Why
I
do you
think
think that?
it's not that I think, it's just the data. But
Well, I know that, but I'm saying, do
yeah,
you
yeah.
have a
Oh,
perspective of why?
because a lot of us grew up in the 80s and the 90s in the crack era, when our fathers were being pushed into prisons and drugs and all these other things that was happening to our families in the 70s and the 80s, man, that was draining our that was taking from our family, you know what I'm saying? Like economically and socially taken from our families, you know what I'm saying? And people don't want to really address the context in that, you know, you dig what I'm saying? So I think today you're seeing a lot of, I won't say a lot, but I would say you know, your eyes tell you black men are involved, you know, within their families. And the data says that, you know what I'm saying? Um, I think that I think that when it comes down to it, um, I was thinking about I was reading a story. I was reading a story, and it was about an old woman growing up in the during the Great Depression, right? And so she developed an attitude of, you know, because she grew up in the Great Depression, she developed an attitude of, hey, I need to preserve things. So this is where we get a lot of our family members who put plastic on furniture. They didn't buy new vehicles. They kept things, right? They hoard. They kept things. You know what I'm saying? And I always think about, you know, growing up, um, a lot of us were prepared for a world that already passed. We weren't being prepped for a world that was coming. You dig what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so a lot of us today who are, you know, black men are preparing our kids for a world that's, you know, for the future, you know what I'm saying?
For the future. Okay.
Yeah, development for the future. So I land my plane saying that I don't think we're as divided as,
Yeah.
you know, as things seem. There is ideological differences, push and pull, and a lot of that has to do with economics. It really has to do with economics. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And instead of fighting over who's making what and who's valued at this, you just come together, man, and be people, man. Like yeah, it just doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't make sense.
And I love that. And so in this sweet serenade, as I pass it to Doc, we need it. So what I'm hearing you say, and I agree, Tay, is we, like we're doing right now, we need to all together show a unified front, because there are some shortfalls in the community, in every community, right? But to address the problem and don't have a solution is just to complain, which is what I see a lot of people doing, because it's nothing worse than somebody to complain and not do anything about it. But I hear a lot of people say that if I had money, things would be different. But I've also seen people get money and things don't change. And so what you think about that, Doc? So to everything that you're saying, and as we wrap up this sweet serenade.
Man, you know, my only caveat, because I don't talk about black people as a monolithic unit without discussing the only thing we all have in common. There's only one thing that all black people in America share. Well, actually, 90% of us. 90% of black people in America have a descendant who was enslaved in America. 90%. That's all we have in common. Outside of that, we have nothing else but shared trauma that we've created for coping and therapy. Plus, we are more scrutinized, and we are ultimately, we're under the microscope, because anything that we do that is deviant, that will support the narrative that we are savage, brute, uncouth, uncivilized, will be amplified via the media, and unfortunately other black people who perpetuate the stereotype for their own self-interest. And so what I'd say is that the reason that you don't see the solidarity, which I think is more important, because as a black person, you can say no comment. You know, I don't have to comment on what's going on with every black person in America. It ain't my
Man,
business.
most black people want to say something,
No,
man.
but let's talk about that, because that's what's called meritorious manumission. The
Ooh.
idea that
Get the dictionary out now.
well, no, because so they passed laws that created incentive for us to tell on each other.
Yeah.
And so because of that, the culture is still today. It's like, if I tell on you, I can get less jail time. That's meritorious manumission. So these laws were created to bring division and fracture us.
Okay.
And so when you talk about trauma, what I don't like happening is, I don't like black people who have been further removed from slavery than other black people. Because that's all you have. Your people just got slavery quicker than mine. And I'm talking about mental slavery. Because there are people who are still enslaved mentally, even though the chains have been removed from their hands. And so what I find out is that it's unfortunate when we have to comment on everything that black people do. Like, what other group does this? What other group of people has to comment on everything that happens in their community? You don't see it with anybody, because we're all connected in this idea that our shared trauma is comforted by us communicating with each other. So like Tay said, if it's monolithic and you're going to talk about Black people in a group, you must first discuss the only reason we are a group here in the first place. The only reason we were a group here in the first place is because we were here involuntarily,
right?
And so I think that goes back to this idea of the family structure. And when you talk about abuse and trauma and the effects of trauma, it's just because you have been healed, Black man, this other Black man hasn't been healed. And to your point about, I think about religion, because he talked about there is a utility in religion. I do believe that it has a purpose.
Me too.
It has a purpose. However, it has not been used for its correct purpose here. That's my opinion. It has not been used correctly. It has been used as a tool to enslave our minds and promise us an afterlife promise, and don't worry about what's going on right now. And that's my biggest takeaway, is like, I don't care about what you believe. I don't care if you think you're an Israelite. I don't care if you're Islamic. I don't care whatever religions, wherever you pray to the sun. I could care less. I only care about one thing, is that we got the same enemy. And when it's time for us to come together, put your Bible down, put your Quran down, put your Taoism down, and let's get a strategy, because the people we up against got a strategy. And his strategy is for you to be a Baptist, you to be a Lutheran, you to be I don't care about none of that. You are a Black person who have a common enemy, and we need a common strategy. And this divide and conquer has been so pervasive in our minds because we don't know how to make strategy, because we're waiting for the sky to open up and our salvation to come out the sky. And you better open up your chest and come from there. That's my opinion.
Boy,
that's
hot.
The collection plate around for.
Oh, I know, man. I mean,
for the Reverend Doctor.
Listen,
Reverend Doctor.
That's a mic drop. Just drop the mic.
That one was hot. So that one came from the good Dr. Reverend Ham, and we appreciate that for sure. Man, let's take a second to process that one. Okay, man. Yeah. The collective being that we're all here because of slavery. And when you think about what was happening in Africa, like there were different tribes there. Because you remember what I always talk about: classism, tribalism, racism. Like there's two other things on top of racism that we don't even get into, right? And so one of the things I want to tag is, you mentioned, why do Black people always say stuff? And I think it's because it seems like we've been silenced forever.
Valid.
And the appropriation of Black culture, it runs so deep. It is like at some point in time, we couldn't say anything. And now we're to a point where we're in this neo-slavery, to where if you send a post about a movie that whatever you just push and it's like, hey, hold up, you can't send that. Matter of fact, since you send that, you need to do all this stuff to say I'm sorry. And it's like, oh wow, right? It's like, I thought, you know what I mean? Like, who the hell has to apologize? I ain't never. Where the hell is Brett Favre at, yo? Yo, where is he? I have to go look this up, right? Because this is not going to be on the news, right? Yeah. And so, confident opinion being like, first of all, my confident opinion for everything is everything's bullshit, right? Because you can make an argument to anything. And so I hate how we're divided, but I hate how when we come together, we just come together superficially, and it's always in trauma. But right now, look at us. We come together in unity to talk about this abuse of power. This abuse of power, that when I say abuse of power, meaning leverage. Everybody's fighting for some sort of leverage. And so as a man, you can't give up any leverage to anybody. Hell, even your woman sometimes. But they have these statements like happy wife, happy life. Why? Because the woman is emotional. right?
You say happy house, happy spouse, happy house.
That's what you say, because it's both ways. Because if that man ain't happy either, then it's gonna be ugly. But with that being said, the confident opinion is that
is the goal happiness? Because if the goal is happiness, if the goal is to be happy, then you've already been conditioned to what happens to you. Happiness is a conditional statement about, if I happen to find $100 on the ground, I'm gonna be happy. If I happen to lose $100, I'm gonna be sad. I think we have to get out of the goalpost a bit of happiness, because it's too flippant. We don't control the things that happen to us. What we have to get into this idea is that I have duty, responsibility that comes first. Once those are done, like I don't, my kid got to eat whether I'm happy or sad. And so we have to make sure that we're not making happiness the end state.
Okay.
It should be something we do along the way.
Yeah, man. And the piggyback, sorry, man. And piggyback on what Doc's saying, man. That's one thing, when my wife asked me something when we got married. She's like, what do you want? What do you want, in our marriage? I said, to be happy. You know what I'm saying? But that wasn't something my wife could give me. That's something that I have to create. We're always looking for other people to create, joy for us, and we don't create joy for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And this is what men do, right? Men, we don't, we make it taboo to be both masculine and feminine. We don't know what that means, right? Mm-hmm. Not understanding that there is a sun and a moon for a reason. You dig what I'm saying? So, you know what I mean? So, and all of those things have an effect on you. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I'll say, man.
Oh, I like that. Real quick, as I slide the confident opinion to Rob here, confident opinion being that we need to teach a lot more emotional. We just need to teach people how to deal with emotional decision making. There you go, emotional intelligence, just moral consciousness with the emotion and that's one of the problems with men. All right, Rob, what you got? Confident opinion. No cap, buddy.
Yeah, well, my confident opinion is going to kind of come from what your good Dr. Ham was saying. When you bring up emotional intelligence and happiness not being a condition, and there's the duty and responsibility, and I always go back to what mind frame undergirds everything that you do. For me, it is the Christian faith. And so when y'all talk about there is utility in religion, that's really one of those things. So a man that's devoid of some sort of belief system has no reason for why he do what he does to a certain degree, or a more above the surface reason other than what they're confronting right now. And so they move based on what they confront, not some overarching narrative that a religion or a system of thought gives you. And so as a community, we're not necessarily divided on what that is. It's, do we all understand what the utility of that faith commitment brings, right? I am confident in Christianity as truth. And so I believe that a life ordered by God is what, through his son, Jesus Christ, and what he's taught is how you navigate life. And so that's more of my essential identity than necessarily my skin color. That's my confident opinion.
What you got, Janae?
So this is kind of piggybacking off of Tay. So when we're talking about happiness and we're talking about what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, in my mind, I think of fulfillment versus happiness, because when you're looking for fulfillment, you're achieving a goal. And when you talk about families and you talk about marriage and you talk about any kind of union, you have to have a purpose. And without that purpose, there's no reason for it. And so when we talk about a man and a woman coming together and as one, either it will be to build generational wealth that you can pass on to your offspring, or it will be to create a family then that will carry on your lineage. And so that's a purpose, that's fulfillment. And so when we talk about the emotional state of the Black man, we have to look at it as it is a man's duty for himself and for his family to be healed so that he can then control that narrative and control that fulfillment of his future lineage. And so that's the charge that now we give to Black men, because it no one else is going to do that for you. No one else is going to light that fire for you. You have to feel that there's a need for that healing. You have to have a call and a charge within yourself to say, something is not going the way that I necessarily want it to go, in order for you to spark that change within you. And so, like I said, for me, some people, they may feel that it's ego, because a lot of times we consider ego as being the opposite of faith. But whatever it is that sparks you to create that change, you have to drive off of that in order to do anything.
Okay. All right. So what's the difference between the experience of Black man, now versus what it used to be, as far as we say the man needs to be in charge. The man is the head of the household. The man needs to be in charge of healing the family. But this requires resources, and this requires the wherewithal, and it will require some sort of guidance and understanding that there's a difference between complacency and content. What was it? Being content. Complacency and being content. Being content was contentment. And so knowing that you could be coming from a lineage where just providing was enough, right? And now providing is not enough. And I stand in a situation from broken relationships where I thought providing was enough, even though I knew it wasn't enough, but I didn't know how to exist because my psychological safety wasn't there. So understanding and knowing the difference between happiness and sadness, and knowing that it's an emotion and that it will pass, right? And so we as men haven't been given the proper tools because we feel like going to counseling might be a little feminine, right? That's effeminate. Like these different things to get help doesn't seem manly. And then with resources, right? You got insurance, you got different, the way some people, we self-medicate, right? And so you got something to say to that, Doc? What you got?
No, I just need to interrupt you for a second.
Please.
What you're talking about is the Eurocentric idea of what a man is supposed to be. The idea that the man is look at the animal kingdom. Who does the hunting? The lioness or the lion? Ooh. If you go to Afrocentric mindset, the woman was the gatherer, was the provider, was the nurturer. The man's job was the safety protector. So we have to make sure that we are talking about Eurocentric ideas of capitalistic idea, go get the money. Ooh. Which is fundamentally flawed, because ultimately the woman's job, if you read Proverbs 30 from the Bible, and you see what the woman's job, her job was to go to the market and get the food and bring it back and make sure that the house taken care of was the woman's goal. And so when you start to understand what the man's job was to do, it was to support her.
And that I love doing that. God damn, I love doing that.
But you have to remember is that the man virtue was measured by the wife's security.
Right.
So I was not measured by what I could do, it's what she had. Right. How much she had to go to the market. So you're talking about a Eurocentric mind and an Afrocentric mind, and they're diametrical. And so when we start to fundamentally understand that what we're seeing happening is that we're empowering people not just to be a provider. See, we've told men that as long as you provide, you're good. But there is, and this is my last point I'll talk about, is on the plantation, you could not take care of your woman. If the master beat her, you had to watch. You were emasculated, and she grew resentment because of it. She didn't tell you, but she resented you because you could not protect her. and you resented yourself because you couldn't protect her. So you ran away. If you look at the statistics of people who ran away from slavery, most of them had children and most of them that were married. It wasn't a lot of single people who ran away during slavery. The breaking point for most people who escaped slavery was they could not stand the abuse of the person they were married to. That's why they fled. That's why they left their children. Henry Bibb wrote a very good slave narrative about this. And he understands there's an emotion. So during slavery, you could not express emotion on the plantation, which is why the laughing barrel was there. There was a barrel of water, and if you wanted to scream, if you wanted to cry, you had to go put your head in that barrel and let out your emotion there, because any sign of emotion would result in harsh retaliation. So we learned how to internalize our emotions for safety. This is Maslow hierarchy, right? Mm-hmm. Maslow said, look, it was not safe to show emotion. So when did we ever learn how to do it? Who taught us? And so I think what we're seeing today is we're seeing people who were emotionally incapable because there was no utility in it. Because if it was going to get me lashed to cry or to yell, then I'm not going to do it. And my parents' job was to enforce that on me.
Now,
yeah, buddy.
Tell me how that's not the same thing where you got folks telling, I know the dude crazy, but folks telling Kyrie you just need to shut up. I mean, even through all that, I know people say it, but sometimes I feel like I hear that slave thing, like saying shut up and just.
I don't think it's shut up, man. I think it's that Kyrie's just misinformed, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, Negroes, we weren't Hebrews. Like, stop that. Stop it, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, look, man, a quote from Gary Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Week, which later became Black History Month. He said Negroes want to be Hebrew, want to be Greek, want to be Latin, and they want to be Tutton. He was talking about Egyptian, but they don't want to be African. They don't want to be everything else but African. You know what I'm saying? Because within the African culture, you know what I'm saying? Like Dr. Ham was saying, we had a shared responsibility, a communal responsibility between man, woman, child, community. What tore that apart was capitalism, man. You know what I'm saying? We don't talk enough about capitalism, right? That song, Papa was a Rolling Stone, right? Papa was a Rolling Stone. You know what I'm saying? That song is talking about when black men had to go up to the north to find jobs and they would come back. Yep. And guess what they would do along the way? They would have other families and things of that nature. You
That's
know what
I was just talking about with my grandfather, Tay.
Yeah, and look, and I'm not gonna say that I had my grandpa, but look, my grandpa left the South, went up north, and came back and got my grandmom after he got money, and then he came back and got his sisters and things of that nature. That's what happened to our families. So within that, it was a broken home, and within that, a lot of our grandparents, especially our grandmothers, they couldn't work. You know what I'm saying? They couldn't work. They worked low wage jobs. They had to support. So there was no time. There was no time for emotion. There was only time to survive. That's what we got taught. We got taught how to survive. And you know what I'm saying? And so we passed that survival down, you know what I'm saying? So, you know what I mean? We have to break the chain of survival and add in emotion. Like, hey, it's okay to keep your head on a swivel. You dig what I'm saying? Because you got, folk out here crazy, you know what I'm saying? But we have to break that that chain of survival and add emotion. And I agree with Dr. Ham, man. We have to stop thinking through the Eurocentric mind of what the relationship looked like, right? Because back then that's how their relationships were structured. It was man, woman, and woman, you're gonna do this. You know what I'm saying? That's
man, goat.
Yeah, woman. That's not how it was in African or even, you know what I mean, and even in the enslaved population in our communities. That's not how it was, man. You know what I'm saying? And we need to get back to that. You know what I'm saying? In many ways. So
all right. So what you got, Rob? We're talking about splitting the difference on thought, and so any added to what's been said?
Yeah, well, I'm a diehard capitalist. I love capitalism. I believe capitalism is a good thing. The issue is what what should you and should you not be allowed to sell? Maybe that's a conversation for that's another conversation because
we'll have it.
So because as much as I like solidarity, I also like my own individualism too. And sometimes my individualism may not always agree with what the solidarity wants. So if I go out and produce something that earns me a significant sum of money, the community is not necessarily entitled to what I produce necessarily. Now, what I choose to put back into the community should be of my own volition. So I wouldn't denounce capitalism necessarily. I would probably denounce the individuals involved in capitalism, just like any other system.
All right. So we'll say, so with that, in my quick response, objectively, will you say you want to remove the individuals, but when you say capitalism as the ideology, this itself, the principles create the individuals?
Well, to me, capitalism is where it does create the individual, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. The issue is what can the individual produce and provide so that he can survive. And so you can make a moral argument maybe that shouldn't be the case, but the individual means that I own my body is my property and everything I produce is mine. And then it's also for sale to a certain degree. Now, what informs what I choose to sell, how I choose to sell, all of that stuff, we can have a conversation about that. Because if I want to create solidarity, right, and I gin up a lot of loot and share it with the community on my own volition, and use it through the vehicle of capitalism, is that still bad?
Well, that's what we want people to do, but capitalism it seemed like it forces the people to not share the wealth and just,
right.
Kind of. And so what you got, Janae?
I was just going to add to that, when you were speaking of capitalism, the question that exists is, does capitalism basically trump compassion? And so when we look at this and we look at the family structure, we look at the fact that you have someone, as Dr. Ham said, you have someone that can provide financially, but emotionally this person is dead. So is this creating a well-rounded family? Is this creating balance, or is this creating neglect?
I would argue that that's a false binary, because I can't exercise my compassion without my ability to provide something sometimes. And so I don't think it's capitalism versus compassionism. Again, you're talking about the individual, not necessarily the system itself. To me, capitalism is forced altruism, because in order for me to get something, I have to provide something that you want and willing to pay for it. So I don't think it's a compassion versus capitalism. It's compassion. It should just be something inherent within all individuals, whether you're a capitalist or not. So I wouldn't go that far.
So this is my question to you, since we're speaking on capitalism. When we talk of this and we talk of basically a person's ability to provide, that is the big objective. We have to look at that and say that since that's the objective, can a person be bought? And so that's the question in this. We speak on faith and on the structure of Christianity. In that alone, it was a price that was paid. And
right. And so again, it's not necessarily a problem with capitalism, more so the restraint or the moral compass of the individual. Capitalism is a vehicle. So it's not, can a person be bought? I think anybody can be bought if the price is high enough or if the price is right. The issue is what, again, like I said, what underpins what you do. So if your faith can prevent you from being bought, your moral compass can prevent you from being bought. But to me, that's not necessarily a problem with capitalism, more so that the individual that's participating in that capitalistic endeavor. And so I think everybody, like, I listen to Dr. Ham, I listen to Tay. This is really, really good information. If somebody wants to pay to attend a class by one of these individuals, I feel like he should be paid to teach that information if people are willing to pay for it. And now I'm not saying that people being willing to pay for things is the reason to do or not to do something. Again, that's undergirded by each individual's moral compass.
Okay, what you got, Doc?
I just want to comment that, I've read Adam Smith's book, Wealth of Nations, and I find it interesting that it was created at the height of the slave trade. The only reason that I say that is because at one time, humans were the capital. And everything we do with capital now was done to people, even worse. And I think that the idea that slavery would have not been as worse had the capitalization being that we are the only people who pay to live on the earth. Like no other animal pays to live on the earth. We do. And even in the feudal times, people actually worked less when there was kings and queens because you only worked during the harvest time. I think the sense of capitalization is exploitation of labor. And it's exploitation because the goal of capital is to decrease the amount that you have to pay for labor. That's the goal. That's why jobs are going to China, because labor is cheaper there. And the capitalist job is to capitalize on cheap labor. And cheap labor will be exploited. That's why capitalists want immigration laws so they can get. You know how many capitalists are hiring illegal aliens for the purpose of cheap labor and then go in there and talk about immigration laws?
Yeah, so the problem is that's yes, that's happening, but the issue is the problem that people find in capitalism is the incentives are perverted. To me, it's not necessarily the system. The incentives sometimes are perverted. So one of the reasons jobs get shipped overseas is because it's more expensive to do the business here. Yeah. And so that's to me, that's not an issue. That's not an issue of capitalism. That's a perverted incentive.
No. But you got to remember, but the capitalists, because we're not capitalists, we don't own the means of production, so we are not capitalists.
Well, that's not all the way true. I think everybody's a capitalist.
No. I mean, we participate in the system of capitalism. However, if you look at the definition of capitalist in the dictionary, it says he who owns the means of production. If you don't own the means of production, it's like an industrialist. You're not an industrialist unless you are in an industry and you own the factories and the things that make the industry.
So I'm gonna tell y'all what y'all doing. Y'all are setting the stage for the next powwow that we need to have where we're talking about capitalism. But as we touch on that and how that affects our abuse conversation and the other side of it, Tay, close us out of this cocky explanation as I move into the money tip. We wrap up as we hit our hour and 5-minute mark.
I mean, I guess my cocky explanation would be that I'm just go back to what I said earlier, man. We're not as no, I'm gonna scratch that. Black men are not as broken as we think we are, right? Like we honestly have to be more positive, right? Not only do I have to see you positively, right? I got to see myself positively, right? I got to see Janae positively. I got to see all Black peoples positively, man. And we are not as broken as we make it seem. The problem is that we'll go back to capital. I don't know we talk about capital, but the problem is that consumerism and social media and all these other things are telling us that we are, because we can't, we're thousandaires trying to be millionaires, man. You know what I'm saying? We trying to buy wine with beer money. You dig? So we are letting other things tell us who we are, and we're not letting you four tell me who I am. You know what I mean? In a positive manner. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And vice versa. So, we just got to be more positive toward each other, man, and positive inward as well.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Okay. Cochlear explanation real quick for me. Um, it's all distraction. Like everything that we're doing is a distraction because I'm always talking about authentic power, doing the soul work. And what that means, I know that seems kind of, ambiguous, but it means, finding your purpose and finding the purpose of which you exist to help give back to this world because we see the state of it. And so it's about helping the next person. And if we're talking about a man, giving people the psychological safety to be emotional and to feel, and that's on every aspect, to be able to go to do their job the next day. And when we say your job, I don't mean like your occupation in which you get paid, but your job to which, why are you on this earth? And I think it goes back to us not knowing who we are as people. And so we really need to know who we are. So Eurocentric, Afrocentric, these things are important because we need to know who we are. And so we need to know where we come from. And I think that's the big deal. I recently posted something about, did you know that there are certain lakes that exist, that there are black towns under them, right?
Bunch of them.
Yeah, I counted 8 on this one, but these are things that we talk about because we don't know that these exist. Like we need to talk about that there's a fear point blank because at one point in time, extinction was what was thought to be for the black man because it looked like they were trying to exterminate the black people. So with all that being said, Cochlear explanation, seek your authentic power. And as we slide into this money tip, we got about four more minutes. Money tip, book tip, people. We got a lot of people here. So Rob, I'm going to you, man. Money tip. You can give a money tip, book tip. It don't matter. No pressure, just perspective. All aggressive.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite books was Extreme Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I think when we talk about wealth accumulation, wealth building, a lot of us try to get from a bad situation to the extremely good situation as fast as possible, and sometimes that process is take longer than we have the discipline and patience for. Extreme Money Makeover discusses the basic baby steps. Put $500 to $1,000 in the bank for emergencies. Pay off your debt. Start saving. I feel like just if we can get solidarity around those 3 baby steps, because you realize you make a lot more money than you think when you don't have as much of it going out. And so, even a lot of the things that Dr. Ham and everybody was saying is like, hey, just as you're on that journey for your authentic self, or you finding your duty and responsibility, your ability to earn and generate wealth and revenue for yourself allows you to expand the scope of that duty and responsibility. Paying off your debt, saving your money, accumulating assets, and saving for retirement. The Extreme Money Makeover book by Dave Ramsey does a really good, easy layman's, a 5th grader can pick it up. And if you just focus on baby steps 1, 2, and 3, eliminate your debt, have money for an emergency fund, and save 15% of your paycheck, you'll be miles ahead.
Good stuff. All right. Who's ready for the next one? Doc, I know you locked. Go.
So black people control 4% of the wealth of America. And that 4% is actually decreasing. And it will get even less. So I've studied Milton Friedman. I studied Thomas Sowell, Austrian economics. I studied socialist thought. The problem is greed. There's greed in every system. If Milton Friedman was alive today, he would tell you we're not capitalists anymore. We're corporatists. We are essentially a kleptomaniac. And so my book is The Revolt of the Black Athlete, because ultimately in America, if you are not an entertainer or athlete, wealth has been controlled here. So the reason that I have a problem with capitalism is because that 4% that we own, I don't care how much you save, will not be increased. It's going to actually go down, because the way money works is that it takes money to make money. And those few select black people who we can point to who have been wealthy will be used to show the rest of us, why aren't you, black man, doing what he did, which is a lie, because that's not how capital works. We all can't be billionaires by design because it doesn't work that way. And so that's my challenge, is that we educate ourselves. And I'm not saying that the best system is no system, because greed will be in all of them. And to your point, sir, I would rather be around a greedy capitalist than a greedy socialist, because a greedy socialist has no competition.
Damn.
So it's fair.
That's good.
Facts.
That's facts, man. That is facts, man. My money tip is we get ready to go into the Christmas holidays, man. Don't be out here spending money on stuff, man, that you don't need, man. You know what I'm saying? Spend money. Like, look, man, just look, man, save up some money, go on a trip. Go on a trip, go do things with your kids. That's one thing that me and my family did. One of the best things we did, stop spending money on Christmas. And we went on trips. We went to Greece earlier this year. We went on a trip to Egypt, which is dope. I'm trying to go back once that museum is built next year. And then we also trying to make a trip to the continent, to Africa, to do that. So, and don't spend money on a whole bunch of stuff. But my book tip is going to be how capitalism underdeveloped Black America.
Ooh.
Manning Marable is considered is a historian, a Black historian, right? I would say that he's in the same mold as Marx and Engels. You know what I'm saying? And that they're historians, but they're explaining how labor and economics and society and politics are all changing, and as how the proletariat, the workforce is, as Dr. Ham saying, has less. We keep doing things, but we have less all day, and we're making decisions, at the voting booth that's going to give our generations less. You know what I'm saying? I talk about the boomer generation. They're the worst generation. Like, they're terrible. They're greedy. And I talk about them, and I don't care what people say. They are greedy. They are a generation of folk. I'm gonna wrap up, but they're a generation of folk who benefited from their parents getting government help and government welfare, low colleges,
They don't
housing. They were able to buy houses. At 18, they had jobs. They had jobs paying $20 an hour. Their family was taken care of. And what did they do when they became 30 and 40 years old? They took it away from their kids. I do not like the boomer generation. Not all.
Sounds like Atlas Shrugged.
My bad, man.
I like it.
What
you got?
Hey, I could talk about capitalism. I'm gonna talk about something. I'm gonna go off on these boomers.
Hey, next time we're going out with capitalism. Is gonna be it. What you got, Janae?
Bam.
Look, and here I am. Here I am as the woman and the mother on the platform, and I'm going to bring it back to love. After you men have made all this money, I need you to get into the love language book, man. Love language. I push this. Calvin and I would push this. Gary Chapman. A lot of people don't want to talk about this book, but it's important. In order for you to express love, you have to know how to love yourself and what speaks to you so that you can speak it to other people. And in order to do that, read the book, take the quiz, share your quiz with people that you want to love you correctly. That right there, we need to learn how to speak the right languages to each other. That will eliminate a lot of miscommunication.
I co-sign that book. I would co-sign that book for real.
That's how you make love logical.
I got it. What's your primary alternate?
Oh, mine is gifts and words of affirmation.
Who are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Are you asking me? Oh, listen, I have all of them, but my top one is words of affirmation.
Okay. You the unicorn.
I'm the unicorn. Look, I need them all.
I need them all too. But honestly, right now, it might be acts of service. Ooh. When you out here acting by yourself, you're like, can you take care of that? Damn, I need an assistant.
Anyway. Look, listen, we talked about that with Kevin. I need help.
Yeah, help. Okay, all right. So we got about I'm gonna try to be punctual with this. I got about 20 seconds. So my money tip, real talk, is I recently just put my car in Firestone, and what I do at Firestone is I get the lifetime alignment and I get the lifetime balance. And so what I'm able to do with that is I pay that fee, that one-time fee of pretty much 2 services at once, and then I can always go back and get it done. And so that's a way you save money on the maintenance for your cars. You go ahead and pay up front that 2 times, and then you have that for the rest of the life of that car for the alignment. But the tires is only for those tires. Now, don't tell them you get new tires. They dumb. Anyway, so that's the money tip real quick. And 48 laws of power, people. 48 laws of power. But not for corruption, to understand what power looks like in the external form and how it could be used to manipulate. But you could use it sometime because that's assassin work. Anyway, all right, people. Objectively aggressive. This has been a good one. Sorry about the technical difficulties up front, but we don't let that stop us. And I like this. So I feel like I'm gonna bring us back together in this large form. Not all the time, but shit, maybe. Who knows? With that being said, I love y'all. I appreciate all y'all.
Thanks for having me.
Y'all just don't know. Election night. We out here. Y'all stay on. Let me close this out.